Okay guys, so tonight we're going to be looking at Learning Unit 1 as well as just prepping you where to go forward with Learning Unit 2 and 3 over the next couple of weeks. I will be putting out some recordings and what have you during the course of next week, but I just wanted to prep you a bit in terms of what you need to know and what have you, because obviously your assignment is coming up. And our next lecture is actually our NSS for the assignment. So I'm just going to tonight look at Learning 1, pull up the assignment just so you can see and connect the dots with what's going on. And then also, like I said, look at Learning Unit 2, not discuss Learning Unit 2 and 3 in detail. We will do that at the start of our NSS next week, but then obviously going through the content as a whole. Okay, sorry, just a random person phoning me. Right, so before I get started, I want to know, anyone have any questions or anything you want clarity on before I get started? Anything at all? As weird or anything as you guys need? Any questions at all? No? Silence. Okay. Just thought I would double check, because often people then go, why didn't you ask? So just covering all the bases. Okay. So to start, Learning Unit 1 is obviously all focusing on the history of the South African media and thinking about the context of South Africa in terms of what went on during that time period. So when I say media and apartheid, what are the words that pop into your heads? After doing the research the last week or so. Restriction, good. Censorship, yes. 100% censoring. Okay, what else? A lot of propaganda, very true. Would you say it was an easy time for South African media? Repression, good. Was it an easy time or a challenging time? I know that seems like an obvious question. What do you guys think? Do you think? Yeah, very challenging. Thanks, Nicoletta. So hopefully once you've read through the learning unit and through the prescribed material, you should have a sense of yes or no, Taylor. I'm going to get to that now. So hopefully you have a sense of understanding that this time period was very much about oppression. It was about restrictions. It was about limitations. And it basically was about the media being a mouthpiece for the South African government. So their job essentially was to ensure that the apartheid regime was promoted, maintained, and that the media that was released was applicable for different groups within South Africa. So I don't know if you guys noticed in the readings, when your additional readings and what have you, that the media during this time had white media and people of color. So what the white people in South Africa got was a very different picture to what anyone of color got. So white people were allowed newspapers freely. The stories were written in such a way that it played down apartheid. It made sure that they thought that this was done for the interests of POC, that it was done with their best interests at heart, and what we're doing is a good thing. That is what the white media would receive, or white audience, sorry, would receive, where the the black audience, or people of color, because it also included those that were colored and Indian, was media that was restricted. Only very few publications were released, and were limited in the way that that information was presented. The stories, again, were written to say, this is a good thing we're doing for you, and we're keeping you with people that are like you, and promoting the reasons behind why apartheid is such a good thing. Okay. Yes, that is very true. It's a very similar concept to North Korea and Russia and China, and even some UAE states where there is control over the media, where there is no press freedom. So even if you were, you know, in an area and you thought that what you were getting was truthful and realistic information, every single person within South Africa was getting some form of biased news. Yes, so only in English and Afrikaans. Later, when we got to the 70s, even some of the 60s, there was African language-based media, but again, it was written to promote the apartheid regime. It was done in such a way to, you know, make people feel like what they were doing was okay. But it was obviously later on when the rules were, and the laws were starting to change. But yeah, English and Afrikaans were obviously the most important languages, and it was the resistance stuff that was done in African languages as well. Yes, so that's also a really good point, is that if you were a journalist during this time, so that's why I was saying I was getting to Taylor's point earlier about being easy or not, no problem, is that you had many different ways of being persecuted if you were a journalist during this time. Your stories on a lesser space could be redacted. So you would get your stories, and you would send in your stories for proofing. Then you would get them back, and they would be blanked out in sections that the government didn't deem fit for the public. So that was like the minor thing, and you got used to it. You got used to getting your stories back with these big lines blacked out and everything. Sorry, I just realized my file's closed. And then after that, you could be fired for writing anything that went against the government. You could be blacklisted, in terms of you could never work within media as long as the government was in control. Or you could be imprisoned, you could be exiled, or you could be killed. So working within the media during that time, there's a lot of people that, look back and go, and say, well, people should have stood their ground. People should have done this and should have done that. Even those that are white or of color, they all said, well, why didn't they stand up for it? But, for some people, obviously there were those that believed in the apartheid regime, but taking those people out of it, those that were against the regime, yeah, exactly. Those that were against against the regime, they were also having to worry about putting food on the table, being able to maintain a salary, being able to keep their family safe. So, there's everyone's got different views on what should or shouldn't happen. And again, it's something that comes up in Learning Unit 2. It's all about your own ethical boundaries. If you think it's fine to promote the ruling party because you would rather have a job than not have a job, then you go about it. But your moral compass might be different to someone else's. So it was only in the late 60s, 70s, but mostly 80s, where we started to see that resistance. We started to see people speaking up, and that's because they started to see change within the country, and also how they started to see more and more people speaking up, so that there was enough support and enough of a voice to actually create change. Yeah, it's easy to see that now. I mean, silencing the voice of freedom in public discourse, basically, yes. And, a lot of people say, well, in this modern age, we don't have that, but that's not true. Yes, the State of Information Bill was passed. Okay, so we could back there. But, Nicolette, at the same time, it didn't go through all the processes. So it got stopped at the final thing where it actually put it into final law. So it's sitting there. It could be processed and could be continued, but thankfully it never went to the final passing that it got written into law. So, you know, let's hope that whoever is in charge, whether it be ANC or whatever, hopefully they never put it into power and it just disappears. So, you know, it was a very difficult time, because also you had journalists themselves that were trying to do good being called into question. So I don't know if you guys know of the Bang Bang Club. So I'll use them as an example. Yes, exactly, Taylor. We always hope that it gets stopped in time. So the Bang Bang Club was a full group of photojournalists in the 1990 to 1994. I had to think about that time frame. And they were always trying to push the limits of what was acceptable during the apartheid era. They were always trying to highlight what was going on within South Africa, but at the same time they were still working for newspapers that had government control. So these guys went into more rural areas. Oh, sorry, let me just tell. All right, at least I've got a keyboard that works this time. So they went into a lot of the more rural black areas. They went to where there was, you know, a lot of civil war between ANC and IFP. They tried to post things that actually tried to create change and create awareness. But at the same time, they still got stopped every possible way that you could be stopped. So there would be government employees at the publications. There would be, I don't know, other forms like editors and that in place. All of those were put in place to say, well, actually, we really appreciate the work you've done, but we can't run that. It's not legal. So I'll give you the example of Greg Marinovich. So if you are sensitive, please just tilt your screen away while I just discuss this. So this picture here was focusing on the IFP ANC civil war that was going on towards the end of apartheid, and he captured the moment this man was set on fire and killed with a panga. And he put his own life in danger by taking this photograph because others, thankfully he was with the other guys, and they ended up shouting before someone killed him, and he got the shot and moved away, and they ran away. But this is an example of the kind of photograph that was not allowed to be distributed within South Africa, showing the upheaval that was going on in our own country. Let me switch that off for now. So he, in particular, they released that picture, they gave it to their newspaper, and they said, sorry, we can't run it. So what they did was him and his mates sent it overseas to the US, and he got the Pulitzer Prize for it. So it was published overseas, and those guys were some of the most instrumental journalists during the time that actually brought awareness to South Africa. So some of you might have heard of Kevin Carter, who released the photo of the vulture and the young girl, but that was in Sudan. So you know, these four people were trying to create change and trying to use their whiteness to actually, yes. So Janine, the movie is based on the book. So it's on Prime if anyone wants to watch it. Or the book is really good and it's got a lot of their photographs in it. But so journalists, like I said, they were trying to use their whiteness to bring attention to these areas. But there's only so much trust that could happen between black and white. So they did what they could. And also for those that were white and working within the resistance movement, they were just as in danger as anyone of color. So one of my lecturers at varsity ended up in jail for, I think it was 5 years, because he was a journalist and he had some books that were deemed against apartheid. And because he was in the media and he was well known, he got imprisoned because of it. So, and that was a white guy. But it just shows you that time period was complete upheaval. and it's something we never ever want to go back to. Yeah, exactly, Taylor. I mean, my husband worked within, just trying so it's been 10 years since he worked as a newspaper photographer. Sorry, I had to think how old my daughter was. But he has been shot with rubber bullets, been tear gassed, had real guns aimed at him, all of this. So, and again, not being able to run the stuff because some stuff is too graphic or whatever it may be. And so even though there has been change, there is still always going to be certain limitations, whether it's done by the publication or, in this case, apartheid was by government. Yeah, very much with what's happening with Gaza and Palestine, what's happening with Russia and Ukraine as well. They also have got media limitations. So it's, again, it's something we experienced 30 years ago, but some people are currently experiencing. And even though this happened 30 years ago, that's still not that long. That's only, that's a young person's age. I always, whenever someone says to me, "Oh, but it was so long ago," I go, "Well, when you're 30, you've hopefully got a job. You might be married, but you really don't have your life together yet. So you might have some good things in place, but really, your life isn't really that complete yet." So that's kind of how I see South African democracy. We're kind of at that learning phase where you're starting to get to know who you really are and start to make yourself known. So I'm hoping we're going into that era, as it were. But what's really important, guys, and the reason why, because I'm sure a lot of you have seen how America slams us for apartheid. Have you guys noticed that in the media about talking about us like that? We are so dreadful. So the difference between us and them, and I'm not trying to be rude or nasty and alienating or whatever, but the difference between us and them was that they didn't put things into law like we did. So we made apartheid law with every single aspect of our being, and because of that, that is why they can sit on their high horses and be like, well, we're better than you, because they didn't put it into law to the extremes we do. And yes, we gave it a name. We made it part of our identity, where for them it was always underhanded. So their racism is just as bad as us. Nowadays it's worse than us. I mean, with Black Lives Matter and everything, theirs hasn't dissipated at all. They weren't ever held accountable for what they've done and put in check, where we were by the world. And so, the media were integral for that, because if they hadn't have done that, if the media hadn't have brought awareness, if the media hadn't stepped up and spoke out and shared their stories internationally and then eventually locally, we wouldn't be where we are today. So what I'm hoping above anything is that what you guys see from this is how important our media freedom is today. Because without that media freedom, we wouldn't be able to know about whatever's happening with the government. We wouldn't have known about the Guptas and Zuma. We wouldn't have known about Nkandla. We wouldn't know about those things, because anything could be happening and we would not know any different, because we wouldn't have the legal rights to report on these things. So a lot of people comment on the media saying they're so pedantic or pathetic, because they're always saying we will speak up for ourselves and we will release fair, accurate, truthful information. And that's because of the PTSD of apartheid. Because for the 20th century, they were always under some level of oppression. So when someone within South Africa steps out and goes and fabricates stories or hides information or all that, the journalism fraternity step up and go, no, 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 you don't, because they will not, they are adamant they will never go back to the state that they experienced during apartheid. And I mean, still, a lot of the journalists today are still apartheid era journalists. There might not be as many of them, but there are still older generations, and it has filtered through with everyone saying, you know, we need to stand firm. Was there anything that you guys found out when doing this? Because I know all of you have studied apartheid at school, or have been exposed to it. You know, this was apartheid, you were living through it, not reading about it afterwards. But was there anything you found out that was really interesting that you didn't know before when it comes to the media? Yes, that was basically the government's ploy, was by covering everything up, keeping blinkers on, making everyone feel all happy and lovely about themselves. So is there anything else you guys found interesting? I'm going to talk to the laws and regulations in a minute, looking at when we look at your assignment in a second. But it's just, it's always nice for me to hear the other side from you guys, that something that you didn't know of before. I think, you know, when I think back to when we studied apartheid and all that, it wasn't something that was discussed. The journalism industry kind of, like when we think of school and what is often taught, it's very much focused on the main characters, which is obviously very important, but it's also, they don't talk about the other side, like the media and how integral they were in the apartheid era. So it's an interesting thing to look at. But then you look at how the media portrayed Mandela, Biko, all the activists that were portrayed as terrorists when they weren't. They were just trying to fight for their country. But, you know, through that bias and through that lens and that framing, that's what the white population were told, that they were seen as terrorists. And, you know, it's depending on who is reporting, so this media bias, which side reports, that determines if someone is an activist or someone is a terrorist. Well, I'm glad that media and now JRN gives you a bit of insight into it and looking at things a bit differently, because yeah, it's an important area to be aware of. But he didn't blow up people. He tried to put a bomb on the train, but it didn't hurt anyone. Yeah, that's Margaret. If you were living it, was very different to those who are reading on the past as well, because again, it would have been told through a white lens during the apartheid era, like what was going on, and then post-apartheid, it was a multi-spectrum lens, which is a very different perspective. Yes. So, Nicoletta, that's something that still exists today. It's called the agenda setting theory. The more prominence a journalist or a publication or the media in general, the more prominence they put on a certain subject, the more value we see in that subject. So if every single news agency is reporting on King Charles tomorrow, suddenly King Charles has importance to us where he has no relevance within South Africa. It just depends on what the media sees as important at that time. And it's only because we don't have the time to go and research and find all the other alternatives. We very much have to use what they give to us. Yes, Taryn, that is 100% relevant. So I'm just going to write here gender setting theory. Okay. No, it would help for a theory. There's other theories that you actually learn in media studies, like Spiral of Silence, and all sorts of others that all still hold relevance. Please ignore the hardy-dars. At least it's not my ducks for a change. That they actually, it's the media that determines our knowledge. And it's a scary thought, because if, you know, an entire media organization decided to ignore something completely, you know, like how they focus on wars for as they immediately happen, and then they kind of forget it and don't cover it. If they completely ignored an entire section of society or an event, we don't know about it. Social media, thankfully, is giving us the ability to find out, but it's still not to the level it should be. And it's also finding our story, which was given tons of hype. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, I just saw that now. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole on how supremacists, oh wait, Margaret, I missed your things. Ideology actually influence all the major events and how it can be used in mass media. Yes, it's so true. And it's scary how much, you know, we all say we don't trust the media, but we put so much trust in the media, social media, traditional media, we all do. Margaret, the government were dictators. Yeah, it was a dictatorship during apartheid, 100%. I mean, when you put things into law and you take away everyone's right to vote, you know, or giving you options to vote for different parties, and that is what you are doing. I don't know if you guys have noticed how the media coverage of Gaza and Palestine and Russia and Ukraine is nothing like it was when those stories initially came out. They will ebb and flow as new things happen, but, you know, the stories, people move on, because if it doesn't impact us immediately, we get used to it and it becomes commonplace, so we get comfortable, so we start to ignore those stories. Yeah, our realities are determined by the media, because it also is determined by what you choose to read. So if you are pro-vaccination, you will gravitate towards pro-vaccination stories. If you are anti-vaccination, you will gravitate to anti-vaccination stories. It's only those who really want to have a true understanding and opinion that go and read both sides. But because of the algorithms on social media and Google and everything, it will start pigeonholing you to read the same stuff you believe over and over again, because that is how social media is designed. They can put their lives, yeah, 100%, because people will literally live and die by what people say. So, you know, you can use COVID as an example, whether or not you think COVID is flu or not. The people were so adamant to prove that COVID was wrong that they would do so much to say, you know, no, you're wrong. Whether it would mean deliberately exposing themselves, and then some people passing away, not knowing how their bodies reacted, you know, and then those that are, you know, follow a particular media path when it comes to social media and all those horrible trends and stuff where people end up dying. It's really quite something to think about. And I was looking at representation, it really shows how easy it is for the media to direct the narrative. Yes. And again, with the way our social media and everything is determined, it directs the narrative even more, because if you click on something, I'm sure you guys have all done it on your For You page, if you click in TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and next minute, for me, I have 20 different farm pages. But if you watch one video to do with Trump or the Royals or whatever, next minute, that is your whole For You page. And that's it, you're done. It takes you ages to get your For You page to what you want it to actually be. Taryn, yes and no. So if you think about it, it's, for some people it is a lack of education, or a lack of education of how to research and how to understand things. So, you know, what I always say to my students from first year and you guys is, you know, to have an opinion, you've got to research every different angle. And then only once you have researched them and still believe in what you originally believed in, is that a valid opinion, because you've done that research. So for some, it's a lack of education. For some, It is a blind faith and trust into what is being put out to them. It's also just the power the media holds. So, you know, in some instances, they have that ability because we are blindly trusting them and don't question them. Again, social media is breaking that a bit because we can be told a particular narrative, but then social media comes in with people that we call citizen journalists. Those are actually there, and them saying, actually, this is what's really happening. So, for example, with American school shootings, they have the knowledge, they have the information, yet they still don't do anything about it, and the media still perpetuates either being for gun laws or anti-gun laws. So it's not there is the information, there is the education, you know, the stats are there, but people just choose to ignore it. It's also because we do have choices and free will. Imagine we had the access kind of media we have today whilst the Brits colonized Africa. Oh, yes. So media does. We always have extremists, guys. We always have those that, you know, will go to one extreme or the other. But accountability is so important. We can hold the media accountable now in ways that we never were able to before. Because it's now if they say something, we can question them back. We can say to them, I don't like what you guys are saying. Where is that coming from? And often stories will unravel. So, you know, what was it, the woman that was pregnant with 10 babies or birthed 10 babies? The fact that it was covered by, that we ended up being a laughingstock of the media, and BBC even reporting on our false media. It just shows you, though, there are going to be a lot of people that still believe it because either lack of education, never following up on stories. That's the one big thing, guys. A lot of people that believe things that aren't true, aren't real, because they've seen it in the media. Often stories get released too soon. So back in the day, not saying olden times are great and all that jazz, but when it was traditional print media, we would run on a 24-hour or 12-hour cycle. So newspapers would come out in the morning, some would have newspapers in the evening as well, but we would work on that cycle. We would have the news and TV in the evening, and we'd have radio broadcasts every hour for set hours of the day. So journalists had the time to research. They had the time to actually work out the information. They had the time to get hold of people to interview, to verify facts. They had all of that. What's different to today? How does media differ now? Yeah, that is so true. Because if you didn't trust the media, where were you going to get any information about what's going on in the world around you? Okay, there you go. It's immediate. We work on a 24/7 news run. There is never, ever a time where stories go dormant. It's not like the past where we would find out no information from 7 p.m. till 5 a.m. It means that journalists are under a lot more pressure. They're trying to break news before actually verifying news. And what people often do is they'll read that first story, blindly believe that first story, and never look for follow-ups. So if there are corrections, if there are further developments, if there are changes in what is initially reported, they never know about it because they choose to read the first version of it, read the first few sentences of the story, and then, you know, they leave it at that. Because most people, and I'm sure you all are guilty of this, if you read any news stories, most of you don't go to read till the end of the story. You'll read maybe the first few paragraphs, and then you'll skip to another one. Guilty, anyone? I know I am. Because we just don't have the time, and I'm trying to get in as much information as possible, and trying to make sure that, you know, I know enough of what's going on around me because I'm teaching journalism and media students. But, you know, it's important to remember that some stories are worth reading on. Some stories you need that further information to actually have the knowledge to actually be part of an active conversation like you guys are this evening. So it's so important to remember that when you are reading up everything, when you are, you know, being active within the media landscape. It is always so important to ensure that what you are doing is following up on stories, finding out if what you are writing, or reading, not writing, what you're reading is actually still going on as it was initially put out there. Because if you don't do that, what happens is that you will spread information that is false. And you really don't want that. You want accurate and truthful information. So we're actually discussing what is in Learning Unit 2 and in Learning Unit 3 as well in all one go, because we're talking about the journalism industry. We're also talking about like the ethical issues of this, because it's obviously a big no-no, but we will talk about that further. So what you guys are seeing here above all is how significantly the media has changed from the apartheid era to today. And some of those changes are because of the media, because of the rules and laws put in place. Some of it is because of government changes and laws, like we all have the right to, in our constitution, everyone has the right to access to media in some way, shape or form, so that everyone should be able to get a newspaper, radio, any form of media, but everyone has the right to truthful and accurate information. So that is thankfully written into our constitution. But some of it is also because these changes of where we are today is because of our social media and our technological developments, because tech is actually something that is so important. That tech is actually what is pushing the media the way it is. So before it was just, newspapers needing to have an app, and that app then, puts out the stories as if it was a first it was a website, sorry, and they would what they call shovelware. They would take whatever was on the newspaper, they'd obviously have the digital copy of it and put it on the website. Then it became an app, and it would just have a list of stories. Now it's about journalists having Instagram pages and Twitter accounts and having blogs and everything that they need to have this active engagement with the audience. And people are no longer happy with just knowing a journalist through their stories. They want a bigger chunk out of them. They want to know what they think. They want to know, that deeper story, whether it be in their writing or in their personal lives. So, I hate bringing in COVID. I'm not doing it as a COVID thing, but obviously because of what happened from 2020, this was put on steroids, where we were going through that trajectory already. It got amplified 100 times faster than it probably would have gone because of us going into lockdown, because of us wanting personal connection, because of us wanting to know what was going on, literally minute by minute when it came to COVID, because we were stuck indoors, we were limited, we were scared, we didn't know what was going on around us, and we needed connection somehow. And the only way we really knew what was going on was through the media, through every website you guys read, through every WhatsApp message you received, through every news article, social media post. That is all media. So yes, fake news was bad. So it's really important to understand that everything that you guys received to know what was going on in the world around you was the media. And a lot of us used the media as a tool to try and feel like a sense of control by tracking the numbers, or as an escape by watching series and movies on repeat because there was nothing else to do. But it's all information being sent to you. So where we are focusing on traditional media, the reality is, and we will be looking at social media in that as well, but it's no different. Even though we've got all these different options, it's still the same thing. We're still relying on media to tell us what's going on in the world. Yes, that's really a good point. We were trying to find a constant. We were trying to make sense of the world. We were trying to work out if our fears were justified or if our fears were, not something of value. And the thing is, everyone's fears in the beginning were valid, because we were sitting in a place of unknown. But again, the media did make it worse, because they, again, with that 24/7 cycle, a lot of people got media burnout. A lot of people got, you know, ended up with anxiety and depression because of the media, because of that information being released. And a lot of people say, but it's just information. There are kids that have killed themselves because of Netflix series. There are people that have freaked out and changed their whole lives based on the stories that they hear. So they have that hold. So where in the past it was a hold to promote a particular way of life, now it's different, but it's still, they have that much power over us, because there's not a single one of you in this group that either doesn't use WhatsApp, read a social media post or a news article, or listen to the radio, or watch TV or something. Am I right? Is there anyone that is a media agoraphobe? I don't know what the better, that you completely disassociate from the media. I wouldn't think so, because even if you're driving and see a billboard, it's all media, guys. So it's important for us to realize how important the media is, and also how important it is to take everything you read and everything you do with a pinch of salt, because you don't want to, you know, push yourselves to the extreme where you get burnout and get that media burnout. Yeah, Kiara, it's very easy to do that. Everyone has that moment where you research something in depth, whether it be about health scare, World War III, whatever it may be. I would say it's impossible to do so, Nicoletta. Yeah, during my parents took away, ooh, sorry, I touched the emojis thing, took away all their social media. That was a really good idea. I wish I'd done that. I wish someone had taken my phone away. Yeah, Tobeka, that's exactly, so I logged off a lot of social medias and stuff because I was just getting too overwhelmed, because I was still needing to keep my JRNS students updated, because we went online, you know, like you guys are now. So there's still, like, I still had to have this connectivity. But, you know, there is something to be said about only having your media in small bursts at certain times of the day. There's actually value in it, because we actually get to live. But at the same time, the other argument is then you are an ostrich with your head in the sand and you don't know what's going on, and, you know, you should be more aware of the world around you. Everyone gets to make their own decisions of what side you fall onto. Remotely in Dubai and Kuwait, and our contracts were put on pause due to, because of the war in the Middle East. We all watched the news to try and determine what would happen in our contacts. Oh, Margaret, there must have been such a unnerving time. And this is the thing, guys, is that we forget, like I said earlier, we have the things that we experience, whether it be protests, whether it be floods, whether it be whatever, everyone goes through it in some time. But our media has to also, so we have to find the balance, but the media also has to find a balance in informing us, but not fear-mongering. Okay, so that was a really interesting discussion, guys. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. These are the nights I love, where we have really interesting conversations. Off the topic, sort of, I understand now how my mother believes everything she reads and sees online. Yes, and my mother's also in her 70s and does the exact same thing. And my best is when she cuts out stories from the newspaper and says, you must read this. And I'm like, one, it's the Daily News. I don't trust them because I know who owns them. Two, I've already been exposed to about 20 different versions of the story. I think she sometimes forgets that her daughter teaches journalism. I don't know. But it's very much as she goes, but did you see this in a paper? And I'm like, well, it was already disproved by this morning. Oh, where did you see that? And I'm like, please, can you start reading online? Just make our lives easier. No. Listen, my mom's a highly intelligent woman with multiple degrees behind her name. But when it comes to newspapers, and also someone who was active during the apartheid era with Buthelezi and that whole crew, so she's not dim or anything. It's just because you almost get brainwashed into trusting the media because that is what you experience your entire life, especially if you don't go and immerse yourself in social media and digital media. Let's see. Also feel like a lot of social media platforms like TikTok, people think they're journalists. Yes. So this is the thing, guys. So we will talk about citizen journalists. Citizen journalists are incredibly important to media, but at the same time, there is a lot of bias when it comes to citizen journalists. You have those that make it their career and they choose to be boots on the ground in their area and report on stuff, but they follow the principles of journalism. Where other citizen journalists are, they're at an event, there's a major explosion, they start live streaming on their phone, and it's all a one-sided account. They all have value, but it's a journalist's job to take those accounts and make it into a well-rounded and balanced story. It's like when the explosion in Joburg happened, and everyone immediately blamed government and blamed the gas lines, and it turned out it wasn't that, and it was because obviously as it happened, it just everyone started blaming all the wrong people because no one was given the time to actually find out what was going on and speak to the powers that be and all that, because citizen journalists were obviously taking photos and recording the street breaking up, and everyone then starts to speculate. So it's important to remember that those people have value, but the real stories are the ones that you need to focus on an hour or 2 hours later when journalists have had the time to actually find out the information. All right. So we're running out of time, so I just want to explain to you how this all works in terms of your assignment. Okay. So hold on. Various life decisions as a paramedic people take. Ooh, that one gets to me as well. Because that's when I think of when TMZ reported on Kobe Bryant, of his death before the families have been notified. There's a time and place, and when it comes to people's lives, that's crossing a line. To me, the value of life is more important than any story. So, but again, I'm a traditional trained journalist, so it depends on what era that you live, and it depends on, again, your own ethics and all that. But yeah. Oh no, man. Oh yes, they did show the autopsy report. Yes, sorry, I was thinking meaning of another story. Yeah, these lines, and I understand, getting a celebrity making out with someone they're not meant to, whatever, but not when it comes to literally life and death situations. Okay. So guys, going back to your assignment. So your assignment, I just want to briefly talk about it. Like I said, in the next lecture, we've already started talking about Learning Unit 2 and 3. This is exactly what Learning Unit 2 is about, is ethics, and when it's deemed ethically acceptable or not. So for those of you that have started on Learning Unit 2, let me just pull it up quickly before, no. Let me carry on as I was going, and then we'll pull up Learning Unit 2 and 3. Okay. So you guys are working as journalists at Gravesend Media, okay? And you are going to be working on different sections within this assignment, okay? So you guys can go read the background. I will go through it in full detail in the NSS, but just for tonight, it says you are at training, so you're doing this course, and you learn that it's important for you to understand the history of the journalism industry in South Africa. The course focuses on understanding the journalism industry during the apartheid era and how it has shaped the industry today. Okay, and it's all about understanding the background. So it says you are given the task to write a reflection on what you have learned about this. Okay, so you are doing a reflection piece, which is a discussion. Okay, so it's 600 to 1,000 words. Just so you guys all know, I always give a 10% leeway, so I'm always happy for you to go up by 10%, never below the word count though. So 1:1 would be acceptable for me. I'll go through referencing, I'll go through everything in that in our NSS, but just to explain simply what you're going to do. So it says it's a discussion, it's a reflection piece, it's not an essay. Okay, so while you can have like an introduction that's included in your writing, just kind of to open it up, it's not a this essay will discuss. Okay, so I just want you guys, for those of you that have started writing, and I've had some of you message me, please remember this is not an essay, it is a discussion. So if you're looking at 1,000 words, that's about 2 pages typed. Also 1.5 line spacing, everyone please. We mark on computers and tablets and everything. The only way that I can write comments effectively and do stars and underlines and all that is if I have that 1.5 line spacing. Otherwise, you will get less comments because I don't have the ability to write on your scripts. So I use a tablet and I write on the tablet as if I was writing on a piece of paper. So you'll see my very messy handwriting, but that's how I choose to mark. Okay. So for 10 marks, you're going to write Taylor. So you could do headings, but or you just break it into paragraphs. You're just not having a traditional introduction and conclusion. So for the introduction, if you wanted to do an introduction, if it irks you to not write an introduction, you can put the piece into the reflection piece into context. So saying, through understanding the journalism industry during the apartheid era, we can have a better understanding of where we are today. So you can do what I call a general statement to start. That's how you would normally start an essay. But then after that, you wouldn't go, this essay will discuss or anything like that. You would just go onto the body. If you're the kind of person that likes subheadings, you are more than welcome to use subheadings. If you're the kind of person that doesn't do well with writing with subheadings, I know I'm one of those. I can read subheadings and other people's subheadings really well, but I don't like writing with subheadings personally. Just my brain doesn't like it. So you can just do paragraphs. So obviously you need to not just throw me straight into this theorist said da 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 da. Rather just at least have one sentence just with a little bit of background context. Let's work on that. We'll work on the idea of context. We'll have introductory context, then go into the main body. That's a better way of wording it. So it's not an introduction, it's introductory context to what you are going to be writing on. Does that make sense to you guys? I know it's semantics, but it makes a difference because I don't want any in this essays. Okay. In our NSS Collab, our next Collab, I have a structure thing that I will put up with you guys as well. What I will also do, so this, I'm going to do, like I said, I'm going to do a Learning Unit 2 and 3 recording for next week, so that you guys have a collab on that content before our NSS. But I'll also have a breakdown, and what I'll try to do is a mini NSS for you guys next week. We're more looking at structure, referencing, that kind of thing. So I'll have those out for you guys within the first couple of days of the week. Okay. So just quickly to have a look at what you're going to do. So it's a discussion in which you discuss the journalism industry during the apartheid era by identifying laws and restrictions placed in the media. So guys, what I want you to think about here is I don't want you just to list laws and restrictions. It has asked you to discuss the journalism industry during the apartheid era. So when you are doing this, what you've got to think about is you need to give me, again, context on a specific aspect of the journalism industry during the apartheid era. So let's say, for example, the concept of censorship. There was laws put in place during the apartheid era. I'm not going to give the exact name and stuff. I expect you guys to do this research. There was a law put in place that meant certain people within the opposition to the apartheid era, those names and those political parties were not allowed to be mentioned in any newspaper. So how you would go about it is saying, during the apartheid era, there was a great deal of censorship and oppression. It was about control through the media, and government used the media as a tool to promote their perspective. And a law which supports this idea is this, and then you have to give me the example and explain how that restriction was used during the apartheid era. So you guys should have three main sections. Yes, Taylor, you're more than welcome to include images, but if you include images, they have to have correct referencing, in-text referencing, and they need to be integrated into the content. So you can't just put an image there and not talk about it. If an image is ever present in an academic essay, you have to then mention it in the text. So you have to say, as seen in image 1, and then you discuss what is there. Okay, so you've got to integrate any images into your discussion. Otherwise, just rather leave them out if you don't feel comfortable doing that. So it's 30 marks. You guys basically can write 3 paragraphs. No, let's say the context paragraph. Say it will be probably 3 to 5 paragraphs. The one thing I will say to you, I don't like full page paragraphs. I know Doug does, so don't. Our approach is different because English is different from German. But I'd rather you have 2 or 3 paragraphs on a page than one whole paragraph. So rather break it down into your thoughts. And I would have a concept, so an idea that happened to the journalism industry during the time, and that law or that restriction that relates to that. Then do the next one and do the next one. The assignment is due. I've got all the due dates here. Sorry, just let me get to the right page. 8th of April. Okay. That's why I'm kind of prepping you now. I know it seems ages away, but I'd rather you have the stuff in the back of your head, or if within the next 2 weeks you start working on it, you can go back and listen to this. So I know I over prep. It's one of my things as a lecturer, but I know everyone's working at different speeds. So I'd rather over prep than you guys panic. Okay. So I'm glad that is the attitude, not the go away attitude, saying it in polite words. So yeah, minimum would be 3 paragraphs because it is for 30 marks, but it is 1,000 words. So yeah, I would say probably two paragraphs a page. So 4 to 5 is probably going to be more realistic. So just think about your structure. Just think about that mark allocation. You know, it's 10 marks for that background, 20 marks for the examples. So because of that, it means the background information to what law or restriction you're going to be talking about, that will be less. There'll be more weight and more information on the law and the restriction and how it applied. That is where your main word count should be. So it's context, the law or restriction, how that impacted the media. So it's a 3-stage process. Okay, so it will be context, then law or restriction, and then it will be the impact, influence, results of. Sorry, I can't type and talk at the same time. Restriction on the media. There you go. So if you go by that 3-step process for each of them, you will be fine. Because what that is doing is you're giving me the context, you're giving me the theory, and then you're giving me the analysis or the discussion. And by doing that, it means that I can see your thought process, and that is what you want at the end of the day. Because I put a lot more value to application and discussion than just listing theory after theory and fact after fact, because I can go and read the textbook myself if I want to. I can go and Google online. So I'm more interested in you guys going and giving me the analysis discussion and background. Okay. Any questions, guys? Any questions at all? I know we're going over time, so that's why I'm just checking before I hang up on you. All good? All right. Then that's it for me tonight, guys. Thanks so much for a really enjoyable collab. I really enjoyed it. Listen to me. You think a journalism lecturer could use better English. It was a very engaging lecture. Thank you. So have a great evening, and I'm sure I'll chat to you guys soon. Bye, everyone.